my name is Caitlin Hansen, and I'm going to be doing a persuasive speech on punishment versus rehabilitation in the United States prison systems. So first, I want to start off by asking the question, how can the government and society as a whole work to reform U.S. prison systems to focus on the rehabilitation of prisoners rather than punishment? Because punishment causes more harm than good, and rehabilitation is a necessity. So first, I want to highlight some causes as to reasons why we lack a focus on rehabilitation. Number one is mass incarceration. America has the highest incarceration rate in the world, and approximately 4% of American adults and juveniles have been arrested by the age of 23. The number of people in prison has substantially increased, which increases the cost of operation for the prisons and leads to the second cause of the issue, which is the lack of funding. These statistics demonstrate why this issue is important now, because prison populations are continuing to grow, so the problem will persist. The second cause is the lack of funding. Since the passage of the 1994 Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act rescinded the Pell Grant eligibility for incarcerated people, colleges and universities and students have been denied Pell funding for college courses taught in prisons. Pell Grants have been used to fund educational programs in federal prisons, and we're able to create many more programs. Federal prisons do not receive enough funding from the government, which means an increase in out-of-pocket costs, resulting in the system turning to private prisons that minimize costs by cutting out many programs that are not beneficial to prisoners' rehabilitation. So some effects of these causes are inmates are not offered the opportunity to improve upon their character. Quote, "It's too bad that I'm probably never going to be able to show the world what I have to offer." End quote. This excerpt from an inmate's writing gives a new perspective on the prison system. The discouraged attitude shown in the writing illustrates the mindset that prisoners develop. Because they are not given chances and motivation to improve themselves, they become discouraged. The second effect is high rates of recidivism. Recidivism is the repeated criminal behavior resulting in being reincarcerated. Quote, "The National Institute of Justice reports that over 75% of released inmates are reincarcerated within 5 years of discharge from prison. This high reoffending rate is due to many U.S. prisons focusing on punishment rather than on rehabilitation. Because prisoners are not given the chance to strengthen their character once released from prison, they have no reason not to fall back into the same pattern of wrongdoings. The fact that prisons focus on their prisoners' suffering rather than their path of rehabilitation is the main cause as to why recidivism is increasing. The third effect is negative effects on mental health. Quote, "Being locked up can make a person feel like they're no longer a person. It makes you feel lower than people on the outside, and that can destroy your will to succeed." End quote. This was also taken from a prison excerpt, or prison nerves excerpt, and it was from a book written by an author who spent a year at a juvenile detention center, and he really got to know some juveniles who were facing being tried as adults, and it really highlighted the effects that punishment within prison systems have on people and their mental health. So prison systems solely focus on making the incarcerated feel the effects of their mistake, and poor treatment of the incarcerated and the harsh conditions of solitary confinement cause one to feel empty. The fourth effect is societal acceptance, and the refusal to change current policies leads to a lower quality of life for criminals that are exiting prison. Quote, "People under community supervision have significantly higher rates of poverty, mental illness, and lower educational attainment than the general public." End quote. Convicts are ineligible for welfare, student loans, public housing, and food stamps. The society refuses to integrate ex-criminals, and therefore they stay in a cycle of poverty. Since convicts are ineligible for multiple opportunities upon release of prison, they have no guidance to help further succeed in life. So some solutions to this is taxpayer funding of education and rehabilitation fundings. Rather than incarcerating and separating, an education offers an opportunity to reduce costs while increasing educational attainment and opportunities for our fellow citizens. Without proper funding, prison systems lack the ability to successfully rehabilitate their occupants. If there is an increase in supply of taxpayer money being used towards prisoner rehabilitation and education, then prisoners will be more likely to have better mindsets and look towards a better future. The second solution is education and rehabilitation within prisons. Studies have shown from our State Department of Corrections that significantly lower rate of recidivism occurs among inmates who have a degree rather than those who haven't. So if the goal is reducing crime, obviously prison education programs have to be regarded as productive. Prisons that provide prisoners with education allows their inmates to have a second chance. Having an education is an incentive for criminals as they leave prison and gives them an opportunity to reintegrate themselves back into society through the workforce, ultimately preventing them from re-entering the prison system. Lastly, the community should support these programs and prisoners working to overcome their harmful past and contribute tax money. Quote, rather than merely incarcerating and separating, education offers an opportunity to reduce costs and increases educational attainment and opportunities for its fellow citizens. If people return to a society that refuses to accept them, no amount of education nor rehabilitation would improve the situation, end quote. In order for us to reform the prison system, the society first needs to be accepting of exiting criminals and provide more rehabilitation options for them. So once again I ask, how can the government and society as a whole work to reform U.S. prison systems to focus on the rehabilitation of prisoners rather than punishment? Because rehabilitation is a necessity within our nation's prison systems, whereas punishment causes much more harm than good. Due to the lack of funding available for federal prisons, rising prison populations, and the focus on punishment instead of rehabilitations, inmates are not provided the opportunity to better themselves and face higher rates of recidivism, negative effects on mental health, and a lower quality of life when exiting prison. In order to break this cycle of punishment and recidivism among prisoners, taxpayer dollars should be used to fund rehabilitation and education programs in federal prisons. This would eventually end the privatization of prisons and create opportunities for prisoners to lead successful lives after serving their time. Quote, no one truly knows a nation until one has been inside its prisons, inside its jails. A nation should not be judged by how it treats its highest citizens, but its lowest ones. End quote. Famously spoken by Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years behind bars in South Africa. Thank you.